they never told you the full story. For years, decades, even you were led to believe that masturbation was something to feel embarrassed about, a phase to grow out of once the gray hairs set in. But here's what nobody ever explained. After 60, the way you care for your body, especially in private, can have a profound effect on your health, your vitality, and even your sense of self as a man. In my 30 years working with older men, I've met hundreds who assumed their struggles were just part of aging. Erectile difficulties, plummeting testosterone, prostate discomfort, emotional dullness, they chalked it up to getting older. But the truth? Many of them weren't sick, they were simply disconnected. I'm Dr. Edward Morris, a urologist and men's health specialist. What I'm about to share could completely reshape the way you view your body. Because here's something few people realize. Most older men either stop masturbating entirely or continue in ways that quietly sabotage their well-being. Did you know that repetitive, rushed self-stimulation can actually condition your brain toward dysfunction? That abstaining from ejaculation can lead to prostate inflammation? Or that unresolved shame and compulsive screen use can rewire your nervous system, leaving you emotionally and physically numb? Most men have never been taught this. And the consequences aren't just limited to sex, they ripple across your hormones, your mood, your energy, and your clarity of mind. But there's hope. Your body can be retrained. Your hormonal health can improve. Sensitivity can return. And that sense of internal aliveness? It's still within reach. In this article, I'll walk you through 7 vital truths about masturbation. After age 60 truths that could help you safeguard your erections, support your hormones, sharpen your mental clarity, and restore your sense of vitality. And by the end, I'll also share a simple daily practice I give my own patients, a ritual that may just be the reset your body's been waiting for. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to stay updated on science-backed insights designed specifically for men in their later years. And if this message hits home, feel free to leave a 1 in the comments. If it doesn't, type 0. Either way, your feedback helps us better serve this community. Let's start with a truth that catches most men off guard. It's not just about whether or not you masturbate, it's how you do it. I've seen countless men fall into a quiet, repetitive habit. Quick, mechanical, detached self-pleasure. It feels harmless, even normal. But over time, it quietly trains the brain to dull sensation, and that's exactly where the trouble begins. Truth number 1. Mindless masturbation conditions you toward numbness and dysfunction. Years ago, I met a man in his early 70s, fit, active, and sharp as ever. But there was a heaviness in his expression he couldn't quite name. After some honest conversation, he admitted, "Doc, I still touch myself, but it just doesn't feel the same." That was the beginning of a much deeper realization, and for him, the beginning of healing. "I don't feel anything anymore." That's what he told me, and sadly, he's far from the only one. I've heard some version of this sentence more times than I can count. Men who think they're doing something ordinary, and in many ways, they are, but no one ever told them that how they masturbate matters just as much as whether they do it. See, your body doesn't just respond, it remembers. Every time you engage in a repetitive, rushed routine, same hand, same speed, same position, same screen, your brain records it. Over time, it starts creating shortcuts. The result? You become less responsive to anything outside that loop. Real intimacy starts to feel muted, sometimes even awkward. You begin to need more stimulation, more pressure, more intensity, just to feel what once came easily. And that's when the questions creep in. What's wrong with me? But the answer usually isn't that something is broken. It's that your system has been conditioned in the wrong direction. This happens more often than people think. When a man moves through this act on autopilot, usually alone, often with lingering guilt, begins to disconnect from the very sensations his nervous system depends on to experience arousal and pleasure. Your brain starts tuning into one narrow channel of input, and soon, everything else starts to feel flat. That's when issues like delayed ejaculation, decreased sensitivity, or even total numbness begin to show up. In some cases, men develop what's now known as porn-induced erectile dysfunction, where the body becomes so attached to high-speed, artificial stimulation that real-life intimacy can't compare. But for others, The change is subtler, a gradual dimming of desire that they can't quite name. And this isn't just about sexual performance. It's about being present. It's about the emotional signals your body sends when you're in tune with yourself. When that awareness slips away, a quiet downward spiral begins. Some men stop engaging altogether, not because they've lost interest, but because they've lost sensation. They retreat, unsure how to get it back. One man, 74 years old, once told me, "It feels like my body forgot how to feel." That line stayed with me, because what he was really saying was, I've become a stranger to myself. And that's often where dysfunction truly begins, not in the circulatory system or the hormones, but deep within the nervous system. And the longer that disconnection lingers, the more difficult it becomes to undo. But here's the hopeful part. It can be reversed. Your body and brain are still capable of change. It starts with simple awareness. Notice what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what kind of signals you're reinforcing. Are you rushing through it, tensing up, relying on the screen just to feel something? Or are you slowing down, breathing, and tuning in? This kind of practice, what I often call conscious touchies, more than just a shift in routine. It's a way to rewire your inner system. It's a way to restore the sensitivity, presence, and connection that may have been lost to habit, distraction, or silent shame. Once you start to grasp just how deeply your habits shape your nervous system, not just your sexual function, but your sense of identity, you begin to understand why so many men suffer in silence. It's not always because they stopped pleasuring themselves, but often because they were never taught how to do it with intention, care, or respect. But here's the twist, and what surprises many of my patients. As harmful as mechanical, disconnected self-pleasure can be, there's something even more widespread and far more harmful. It's what happens when men stop touching themselves altogether. And the consequences? They reach far beyond the bedroom. Truth number 2. Avoiding ejaculation altogether can lead to prostate congestion and chronic discomfort. A few years back, a man named Robert came to see me. He was 68, retired, courteous, and well put together. The kind of guy who rarely complained. But this time, something had been bothering him for months. He was getting up 5, sometimes 6 times a night to urinate. His flow was weak, and he felt a persistent pressure in his lower abdomen. That heavy, bloated feeling wouldn't go away. At first, he just chalked it up to age. "Doc," he told me, "I figured this is what happens when you get older." I ran some basic tests, asked a few standard questions, and then I asked one most doctors never think to ask. "Robert, when was the last time you ejaculated?" He blinked in surprise. "It's been years, not since my wife passed. I thought men my age were supposed to let that go." That belief right there, it's quietly hurting millions of older men. You see, your prostate doesn't stop functioning after retirement. It continues producing seminal fluid throughout your entire life. And if that fluid isn't released regularly, it doesn't just disappear. It accumulates slowly, silently forming what we call prostate congestion. That internal buildup can create inflammation, irritation, and the exact kinds of symptoms Robert was struggling with: nighttime urination, pelvic pressure, even pain. But there's something even more serious you need to know. Ongoing prostate inflammation isn't just uncomfortable, it's also been linked to a higher risk of prostate cancer. Now, I'm not saying that going without ejaculation causes cancer, but I am saying that consistent, intentional release, even solo, helps reduce internal inflammation and supports long-term prostate health. I've witnessed it repeatedly in my clinic. Men who begin a regular practice of mindful self-touch often notice real changes. Their discomfort lessens. They start sleeping through the night again. That sense of internal stuckness lifts, and more than anything, they regain a sense of ease, not just in their body, but in how they move through the day. Robert was no exception. Once he understood that this wasn't about lust or youth, it was about wellness, he gave himself permission to reconnect with his body. And in just a few weeks, he walked back into my office with clearer eyes and a lighter step. Once Robert understood that this wasn't about chasing desire or holding on to youth, but about supporting his health, he allowed himself to reconnect. A few weeks later, he shared something I'll never forget. "I've been sleeping through the night again, and I feel more like myself than I have in a long time." That's the shift. Because ejaculation isn't just the release of fluid, it's a signal. A signal that your reproductive system is still engaged, still alive, still doing its job. And when that signal goes silent for too long, things begin to deteriorate. First slowly, then noticeably. But what most men don't realize is that the breakdown isn't only physical, it's emotional too. When you go extended periods without release, it's not just your tissues that stiffen, it's your spirit. You may begin to feel heavy, closed off, or emotionally numb. It's like something vital goes dormant inside of you. And for some men, that silent emotional burden is just as harmful as the physical one. So, if you've been ignoring this part of your health, telling yourself, it no longer matters, this is your wake-up call. Your prostate doesn't need you to be young. It just needs you to stay in relationship with your own body. But if neglecting your physical needs can create inflammation, what happens when the neglect runs deeper? What if the real issue isn't just behavior, but the beliefs we've inherited about it? Let's talk about something I see all the time, but that few men openly acknowledge: shame. Silent, lingering shame that reshapes not just your habits, but your mental and emotional health. Truth number 3. Shame around self-touch can quietly undermine your mental well-being. There's a certain silence I've learned to notice in older men. It's not dramatic or obvious, it's subtle. It shows in a quick glance away when I ask about their intimacy habits, in the slight slump of their shoulders, in the nervous chuckle that comes with, "Oh, I don't do that anymore, doc. That was for my younger days." But underneath the laughter, there's usually something deeper. It's rarely disinterest. More often, it's that someone at some point taught them they shouldn't. That kind of shame doesn't always yell. Sometimes it just lingers quietly, unspoken, yet deeply felt. Over time, it becomes a silent wedge between a man and his own body. Most of the men I work with grew up in an era when masturbation was treated as sinful, shameful, or weak. Maybe it was a scolding parent, a strict teacher, a sermon from the pulpit. Maybe it was just a look or an offhanded comment. However it was delivered, the message stuck. And years later, it's still echoing inside. You may not even realize how much it's shaped your relationship with yourself, but it shows up in the way you avoid your reflection, in how you rush past moments of desire with embarrassment, in how you label your own needs as foolish or inappropriate. And with time, the act doesn't just stop, the connection stops. And when that connection fades, something even more essential goes with it: your joy. And this isn't just anecdotal, science supports it. Healthy sexual expression, including self-touch, has been shown to balance cortisol, your main stress hormone, while also boosting dopamine, the neurotransmitter tied to motivation, energy, and mood. It also elevates oxytocin, the hormone that deepens feelings of connection and trust. These aren't just fleeting moments of pleasure. They're vital signals that affect your sleep, your ability to cope with stress, and even how clearly your mind works. But shame short-circuits that entire system. It drives stress levels up, fuels cycles of self-judgment, and traps you in a quiet loop of guilt that you may not even be aware of anymore. You convince yourself it's no big deal, that maybe you're too old, that it doesn't matter anymore, but your body, your biology remembers, and it keeps score. I recall one patient, 72 years old, recently divorced, no medications, no major medical problems, but when he sat in front of me, there was something missing in his eyes. He looked distant, like he was still there, but something inside had dimmed. When we spoke, he quietly shared that he hadn't had any sexual contact in over a decade, not with anyone else, not even with himself. "I guess I figured that chapter was behind me," he said. But what had really happened was this: he'd mourned the quiet loss of that part of his life. And not just sexual activity, he was grieving his connection to himself. So we didn't begin with prescriptions or protocols. We started with something far more basic: permission. Permission to release the shame, to reconnect, to remember that his body still belonged to him. Slowly, that shift began. His laughter returned. His eyes lit up again. He started to carry himself with more ease, more energy. And one day, he looked at me and said, "I feel like I'm waking up." That's what shame robs you of: not just function, but presence. It tricks you into believing that your body is no longer a place for warmth, comfort, or connection. And once that belief sets in, it spreads. You stop reaching for your own needs. You stop feeling. And eventually, you forget how to return. But what happens when that emotional disconnection gets paired with a biological one? When your hormones begin to downshift, not just because you're aging, but because your body assumes you've stopped needing them? What if your brain itself begins to power down the very systems that make you feel vital, strong, masculine? That's exactly where we're going next. Truth number 4. Your testosterone declines more rapidly when you disconnect from touch. It's something I wish every man could hear as he crosses into his 60s. Your testosterone doesn't simply fade with age. It declines when your body starts to believe that desire, sensation, and engagement no longer matter to you. I once met a man named Edward, 73 years old, retired firefighter. He had the grip of a man who used to lead without saying much, a presence you could feel the moment he walked into a room. But when he came to my office, something had shifted. His voice was softer, his stance less steady. It was like the weight of the years had started to settle into his bones. "I guess I'm just slowing down, Doc," he said, but his blood work told another story. His testosterone wasn't just low, it had nearly bottomed out. So I asked him the same question I ask every man in that situation. "Are you still sexually active even with yourself?" I asked. He shook his head slowly and replied, "I just don't see the point anymore. That part of my life is behind me." And right there, that belief is what quietly does the most harm. Not the passing years, not the number on your last birthday card, but that quiet moment when a man stops engaging with his own sexuality, not for show, not for anyone else, but simply because it still belongs to him. That's the moment the body begins to downshift. You see, testosterone isn't just a hormone floating through your bloodstream. It's a signal, a message to your entire system. It tells your brain, your heart, your muscles, this man is still alive, still moving, still desiring, still showing up. But when that message fades, your body starts to redirect its energy elsewhere. Blood flow decreases, muscle tone slips, belly fat begins to gather, energy dips, motivation fades, sleep becomes shallow, and gradually, that spark, the one that made you feel grounded, present, like yourself, begins to dim. What most men don't realize is that this isn't permanent. This decline, it can be reversed. When you begin to re-engage with your own body, even through simple, kind, intentional touch, your brain gets the message it's been waiting for. He's still here. Reboot the system. And it listens. That's exactly what happened with Edward. We didn't turn to prescriptions or hormone therapy right away. We began with something far simpler: presence. 10 quiet minutes a day. No expectations. No pressure. Just breath, touch, and awareness. Within a few months, his numbers began to rise, but more importantly, he began to rise. He spoke with more clarity, made more eye contact, started lifting weights again, stood up straighter. He carried himself like a man who had returned to his own life. Because the truth is, your body responds to whatever you pay attention to. If you meet yourself with guilt or avoidance, your system starts to shut down. But if you approach your body with care, intention, and self-respect, something remarkable happens. Physically, emotionally, hormonally, you come back online. This isn't about sex. It's about sending a clear message to your biology that you're still here, that you still care, that you still want to feel. And if you give your body that message, it will hear you, and it will respond. But there's another layer, because even if testosterone levels begin to rise again, there's one part of the male system that's even more delicate, more vulnerable to inactivity, and far less forgiving if neglected. It's your ability to have and maintain an erection, not just for intimacy, but for something far more crucial: survival. And once you understand what's really at stake, you may never see this part of yourself the same way again. Truth number 5. Erections follow a use it or lose it rule. There's a quiet misunderstanding that slips into the minds of many men over 60. I hear it all the time. "Doc, I'm not having sex anymore, so erections aren't something I really worry about." And on the surface, that sounds logical. If you're not being intimate with someone else, why should it matter? But here's what almost no one tells you, and what most doctors rarely say out loud. Your erections aren't only about sex. They're about vascular health, blood flow, nerve function. They're a vital indicator that your body is staying responsive, alive, and connected. I once had a patient named Harold. He was 69, bright, articulate, and deeply thoughtful. He hadn't had an erection in over 5 years, not because his body had failed him, but because, as he put it, there's just no point anymore. His wife had passed away, and he had no interest in pursuing a new relationship. In his mind, that part of his life had simply ended. But here's what most men don't realize. The body doesn't wait for your emotional decision. When a biological system, especially one as intricate as erectile function, goes unused, it doesn't pause politely. It starts to shut down. Like any muscle or vascular network, the penis needs consistent oxygen and blood flow to remain strong and responsive. Without that, the muscle fibers start breaking down. Tissue loses elasticity. Blood vessels begin to stiffen. Microtears form, and the production of nitric oxide, chemical essential to initiating an erection, begins to dwindle. Once these changes take hold, it becomes far more difficult to bring the system back online. And it's not just a matter of agates about neglect, but the impact goes deeper than the physical. When the body stops responding, the mind often follows. Confidence takes a hit, motivation fades, and a quiet sense of resignation starts to settle in. I've witnessed men slowly withdraw, not because they couldn't experience joy, but because the part of them that once signaled aliveness had fallen silent. That's the true cost of ignoring erections. It's not about sex with someone else. It's about maintaining a relationship with yourself. It's about telling your nervous system, your heart, and your brain, this part of me still matters. You still matter. And here's the encouraging part. You don't need a partner to keep this part of your health intact. Gentle, mindful self-stimulation, even without climax, can help sustain tissue function, promote healthy circulation, and keep the neural pathways involved in arousal active. Think of it like a daily stretch or a walk around the block, not for performance, but for preservation. Eventually, Harold agreed to try something simple. Just a few quiet minutes each day. No expectations, no rush, just a private reminder to his body, I'm still here. Months later, he returned for a checkup, smiling. I didn't think it would come back, he said, but it did, and I feel like myself again. That's the heart of the matter. This isn't about chasing youth or reclaiming lost time. It's about defending what is still yours. Erections aren't just symbols of masculinity, they're indicators of blood flow, vitality, and presence. They are your body's way of saying, I'm alive. But what if something else has been quietly tampering with that system all along? Something modern, something common. What if your brain has been rewired without you even knowing it? What comes next may be uncomfortable, but it's something every man deserves to understand. Truth number 6. Pornography can rewire your brain, but the healing is within reach. This isn't an easy topic, not because it's scandalous, but because it sits beneath layers of quiet shame. I've had older men in their 60s, even 70s, look me straight in the eye and confess something they had never told another soul. I still watch porn, doc. It's the only thing that works. They weren't chasing thrill or novelty. They were searching for sensation. For many, it had become a solitary form of comfort after lost divorce, the passing of a partner, or just the weight of loneliness. What they didn't know, and what few men are ever told, is that the kind of porn available today is radically different from what they first saw decades ago. It's no longer a discreet magazine hidden in a drawer. It's high definition, high-intensity content designed to flood the brain with stimulation, available instantly and endlessly. And while it may feel harmless at first, this constant flood overwhelms the nervous system, especially one that's already aging. Every exposure triggers a burst of dopamine, the brain chemical tied to craving, excitement, and satisfaction. But there's a hidden cost. The more artificial dopamine your brain receives, the more it dulls in response. What once brought pleasure now feels muted. You begin to need louder, faster, more intense images just to feel a flicker of the spark. Meanwhile, touch in real life, slow, human, grounded, begins to lose its impact. That's when the real confusion sets in. You might find that you need a screen to finish, or that arousal fades quickly. The sensations once tied to connection now seem distant. and it leads to frustration, then emotional flatness, and then the creeping belief that something inside you is broken. But the truth is, you're not broken. Your brain has simply adapted to something it was never designed for. This isn't about shame. It's about how your nervous system works. And the beautiful part? It can change. Even in your 60s or 70s, your brain still has neuroplasticity, the ability to form new patterns, new signals, new pathways. Many men begin by stepping away from porn for a while, maybe 30 days. Others shift their focus from screen-based arousal to something quieter and more personal. Breath, memory, imagination, sensation. It's not about cutting off pleasure. It's about rediscovering it through presence rather than performance. I remember Edward, a 66-year-old patient who told me he hadn't felt truly aroused by anything real in over a decade. "It's like I forgot how to feel," he said. But after a few weeks of slow, mindful self-connection, something changed. "I'm waking up again," he told Minot, "just physically, but emotionally too." That's what this is really about. Porn pushes you to chase. Healing draws you inward. It reminds you that the answer isn't out there, it's within your own body. And once the noise fades, the real youth feeling, responsive, fully alive version begins to return. Truth number 7. Isolation is the quietest, yet most dangerous mistake of all. In all my years working with older men, there's something I've come to recognize that doesn't show up in lab results. It's in their posture, their eyes, the subtle way their presence seems muted. I saw it clearly in Walter, a 76-year-old retired engineer who came in for a routine exam. He was polite, thoughtful, and spoke with precision. But beneath that calm exterior, something was missing. When I asked him about his daily routine, he said, almost as an afterthought, "I haven't been touched in over a year. Not even a handshake." He didn't say it with sadness, just quiet acceptance, as if that's just how life unfolds after a certain age. But our bodies were never meant to go untouched. As human beings, we are biologically wired to need connection through skin, through emotion, through sensation. When that contact disappears, something deeper begins to fade, not all at once, but gradually. It doesn't start with loneliness. It often starts in private, behind closed doors. When a man stops tending to his body, not just in sexual ways, but in basic human ways, stouching his skin, placing a hand on his chest, offering care to himself, that's when the withdrawal begins. And it's not just emotional. Physiologically, the body starts to shift. Stress hormones like cortisol rise. Dopamine and oxytocin drop. Blood pressure creeps up. Sleep becomes fragmented. Immunity weakens. And with time, this physical shutdown bleeds into the emotional. You begin to feel numb. You avoid the mirror. You stop reaching for others. Eventually, you stop reaching for yourself. The danger isn't in one lonely night. It's in the accumulation, the skipped rituals, the untouched mornings, the quiet decision to disconnect just a little more each day. And then, one morning, you realize you haven't felt truly present in weeks. This isn't just a pattern of the mind, it's a shift in the nervous system. Research has shown that prolonged isolation contributes to depression, cardiovascular problems, cognitive decline, and even a shorter lifespan. And yet, it unfolds so silently that most men don't even realize it's happening. But here's what I need you to remember. It's not too late to return. No matter your age, your body still longs for contact. Your skin still carries memory. Your heart still wants to feel. And none of it requires a partner. You don't need intimacy with someone else to restore this connection. All it takes is the choice to come home to yourself, to pause, to breathe, to place a gentle hand on your own body, not with urgency, but with kindness. Because healing doesn't begin with someone else's touch. It begins with your own. And that touch, no matter how small, tells your body, I'm still here, I still matter. I've witnessed men return to themselves after years of emotional and physical detachment simply by choosing to slow down, breathe, and gently reconnect with their bodies. Just 5 quiet minutes each morning, hand on the chest, stomach, or thigh, not to chase arousal, but to remember, I'm still here, I still matter. That's what Peter did. A soft, personal ritual at sunrise, before even rising from bed. Months later, he shared something that stayed with me. I didn't realize how far I drifted, but I feel like I'm coming back. That's the impact of presence, and that's the real cost of isolation, not just being cut off from others, but being estranged from yourself. Which brings us to the most important part of all. Now that you've seen the full picture, now that you understand what's truly at risk, the question isn't what's wrong, but what now? In a moment, I'll show you the same 10-minute daily ritual I teach my patients. It's gentle, intentional, and designed to help your body relearn how to feel, to reawaken what time, habit, and silence may have dulled. But before we go there, I want to speak directly to you, not as a physician, but as someone who has sat across from hundreds of men who've quietly wondered, is this just how it ends? Men who felt the light fading inside but didn't know what to do. Men burdened by shame, confusion, or silence. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. We've explored 7 vital truths, together truths, grounded in science, experience, and the lived reality of men over 60. We began with how mindless self-pleasure can unknowingly dull your sensitivity and connection. We discussed how going without ejaculation doesn't preserve your health, it can congest your prostate and worsen inflammation. We addressed how old shame planted in youth still echoes in your nervous system today, clouding your joy and keeping you distant from yourself. We talked about testosterone not just as a hormone, but as a signal, and how it drops not only with age, but with withdrawal from life. We saw how erections aren't just for sex, but for sustaining blood flow, nerve health, and overall vitality. We looked at how modern pornography, with its overstimulation, can numb the brain and dull your ability to experience real touch. And finally, we confronted the most silent threat of all, isolation. When touch disappears, whether from others or from yourself, your entire system begins to slowly shut down. These aren't easy truths, but if they stirred something inside you, that's a sign. There's still life, still spark, still time. You're not broken, you're disconnected, and you can return. Because every part of your biology, your mind, your hormones, your nervous system is capable of responding. It just needs a message, a signal that says, I'm still here, I still want to feel. I've seen that shift happen. Men who thought it was too late slowly reclaiming not their youth, but their presence, their strength, their self-respect. This isn't about chasing the past, it's about honoring the man you are now with care, with presence, and with the quiet power that comes from reconnecting to yourself. And it all begins with one choice: to come back home to your body, to begin again. Some of these truths may have been difficult to sit with. They might have stirred up memories, emotions, or quiet discomfort. That's not a bad thing. It's a sign that something inside you still responds, still cares. It means the light hasn't gone out, it's just been dimmed. And here's the most important thing I want you to walk away with. You're not beyond help. You haven't aged out of your own story, and it's absolutely not too late. Every part of your body, from your mind to your hormones, from your circulation to your nervous system, still has the ability to respond. But like any system, it needs a message, a reminder that you haven't given up. I've watched countless men walk into my office looking tired, defeated, convinced they'd passed the point of return. And yet, through steady, simple choices, I've watched them come back not to the man they were decades ago, but to a wiser, more grounded version of themselves. They didn't try to rewind time. They chose to become present, to reconnect with their bodies, not with shame or pressure, but with care and intention. And as they did, something inside them woke up again. Because this journey, it's not about chasing sexuality. It's about reclaiming your sense of aliveness, rebuilding your relationship with the only home you'll ever have, your body. That's where we begin. Not with medication or performance goals, but with a quiet, powerful shift in attention. In just a moment, I'll introduce you to something I call the Golden Protocol, a 10-minute daily practice I recommend to the men I work with. It's gentle, private, and incredibly effective at helping your body relearn how to feel, how to signal life, and how to return to itself. So if you've felt a quiet emptiness lately, if you miss the version of yourself that felt grounded, clear, strong, if you've been wondering whether it's too late to feel like you again, stay with me. What comes next might just be the moment your healing begins. And all it takes is a single decision, to reconnect with yourself, to step back into your own presence, to begin again. And if this message spoke to you, if even one part helped you see yourself with more clarity, please take a moment to support this space. Like the video, share it with someone who may need it, and leave a comment below. Your story, your voice, your truth matters. And if you're in a position to help this channel grow, consider making a small contribution through the link in the description. Every bit of support helps me keep this message alive and reaching the men who need it most. Thank you for being here. This journey you're on, it matters deeply, and I'm honored to walk a part of it with you.